In the official histories of the Tang Dynasty, there is a name that appears and then disappears. The historians who came after her decided, collectively and deliberately, that a woman could not be emperor, so they rewrote the record. They reassigned her achievements to men around her. They called her a seductress. They called her a usurper. They called her a monster. These were men she had outgoverned for decades, and they knew it. Her name was Zetian. She was born in 624, the daughter of a general in the service of the Tang court. In a world where girls were not educated, she was educated. She could read classical texts. She could write poetry of genuine sophistication. She could argue with Confucian scholars and consistently win. She was not supposed to exist in this form. She existed anyway. History was not ready for her. At 14 years old, she entered the court of Emperor Taizong, not as a wife, not as a guest. She entered as a Wu Mei, a talented one, the lowest rank of imperial concubine, property, a political instrument at the disposal of a man who barely noticed her, a girl who existed only at the pleasure of the emperor. She spent those years watching. She studied the mechanics of power the way a general studies a map. She observed which officials rose and which fell and why. She learned which alliances held and which collapsed. She read everything she could reach. She was 14 years old, then 15, then 20, and she was preparing for a role that did not yet exist, a role that no woman in Chinese history had ever held. She was not waiting, she was building. When Taizong died, she was sent to a Buddhist convent, the customary fate for concubines who had never produced an heir. It should have been the end of her story, but his son, Emperor Gaozong, remembered her. She returned. She navigated the most dangerous political environment in the world with absolute precision, eliminating rivals, surviving where others did not. She became Empress consort. She became regent. She administered the empire while Gaozong's health declined, and she administered it well. In 690, Zetian declared herself emperor. She was 66 years old. She named her new dynasty the Zhou. She was the first and only woman in the entire history of China to assume the title of emperor in her own right. The Confucian scholars wrote furiously. The court officials objected loudly. They had spent 1,000 years constructing a world in which this was impossible, and she had simply done it anyway. What she actually built across those decades is documented and measurable. She reformed the civil service examination, opening government positions to talent regardless of birth or family name, for the first time in Chinese history. She expanded the borders of the empire through a series of successful military campaigns. She patronised Buddhism, commissioning temples and texts and centres of learning throughout the realm. She governed a population of tens of millions with documented administrative competence. The empire functioned. It grew. The people she governed did not suffer under her rule. When she died at 81, the Tang court immediately began dismantling everything she had built. Her dynasty was erased from the official sequence. Her title was disputed. Her name was systematically removed from records wherever it could be removed. The historians who wrote the accounts that survived called her a sexual predator, a poisoner, a destroyer of the natural order. These were the same men, or their intellectual heirs, whom she had replaced and outperformed and governed for decades. She left a blank stele at her tomb. No inscription, no words, just stone. She said that history would judge her better than she could judge herself.